I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. And I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens, you turn bones into armies, you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. Oh, you're the only one who can. And there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you.
Today's talk is entitled I'm Thirsty. If you've got your Bible or your phone with you, we're in John chapter 4, a very well-known and famous story. John chapter 4, and we'll start around verse 3. What had gone on up until this point is the Pharisees were keeping count of the baptisms that were being performed in the name of Jesus and kind of trying to compare against the baptisms that were being performed in the name of John, his cousin. And they were trying to kind of get this rise out of him, this kind of thing that's within all of us as humans of comparison and competition as well. Of, oh, they're doing better than me, I need to dig in harder. Or, yes, look at me, I'm doing so much better than them, losers. And that's in all of us. And Jesus was well aware of what was going on and what they were trying to pull out of him and out of his disciples. And so we're told in verse 3, so Jesus left the Judean countryside and went back to Galilee. To get there, he had to pass through Samaria. He came into Sychar, a Samaritan village that bordered the field Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was still there. Jesus, worn out by the trip, sat down at the well. It was noon. Now notice what it said there, just in the very beginning there, in kind of verse 4. It said Jesus had to go through Samaria. Now, actually, there were two other routes that he could have taken that would have meant that he didn't have to go through Samaria, but apparently, for whatever reason, Jesus had to. He had to, we'll find out, because he had an appointment with an amazing woman. Let's keep reading. A woman, a Samaritan, came to draw water. Jesus said, "Would you give me a drink of water?" His disciples had gone to the village to buy food for lunch. The Samaritan woman, taken aback, asked, "How come you, a Jew, are asking me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink?" Jews in those days wouldn't be caught dead talking to Samaritans. And Jesus answered, "If you knew the generosity of God and who I am, you would be asking me for a drink, and I would give you fresh, living water." Now, reading this story from the outside, kind of looking in, I think that the woman has every right to be confused here. If we just read the next little bit of the story here. The woman said, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with, and this well is deep. So how are you going to get this living water?" See, looking in, as I said, from the outside, this woman has every right to be a bit confused here with what's going on in this situation. Jesus has just asked her for a drink, and then he said that she should ask him for a drink. So either he wants a drink or he has a drink. Which one is it? And then don't get this woman started on all of the taboos that are being broken just in this short period of time here. Jesus is a single man coming to spend time with her alone. He's a rabbi and she's a woman who's been through, we'll find out, numerous relationships. And now he is asking for water and then saying that he already has water. I'm confused, let alone the poor woman in this story. Well, in true Jesus style, there's more going on here than meets the eye. There's all sorts of different, deeper layers to this weird, confusing conversation that we're kind of eavesdropping in today. There's a double meaning here all the way through this conversation. See, I'm pretty sure that as Jesus had been walking through this Middle Eastern heat, and it being midday, the hottest part of the day, and getting to that well, the source of water, I am sure that Jesus was physically, actually thirsty at this point in the story. Now, there seems to be a lot of weird diets going on around at the moment, aren't there? I don't know if anybody's noticed. I don't know if it's any connection to the fact that we've been in lockdown and perhaps people have been eating at unusual times and eating unusual things and getting all sorts of different habits, and perhaps the the COVID body isn't feeling as fit and healthy as perhaps it normally should be. And so there seems to be this rise, particularly on social media, of all these different diets and these different fads and these different kind of miracle cures that are gonna sort us all out. But we've all had this kind of more time and more opportunity to be on social media during this season. But recently there seems to be a lot more of these kinds of diets about. Maybe you've even tried some yourself. I was reading the other day about one that's called the green juice diet. I don't know if anyone's aware of this one or, again, even tried it themselves. But I don't know what's actually in this green juice. It's some kind of magic. But apparently if you just drink this green juice for 21 days straight, it's going to change your body's chemistry so that you'll end up just craving greens. Now, I don't know how true the science is to back this theory up, but there is a particular truth that that's getting at. As crazy and as wacky and as kind of faddy as that might seem, there is a truth underneath the surface of what's going on just in that green juice diet. You see, what we feed ourselves will change what we hunger and thirst for. So whatever we feed our soul with will determine what we're craving, what we are hungry and thirsty for. Now, there's so much going on back in this conversation in John 4 at the well between Jesus and this woman. There's so much that we could dig into and unpack that we could be here for hours and hours and hours, and I'm not going to put you through that, and it'll get dark in my carriage. But I love reading these kinds of one-on-one conversations where it takes place between Jesus and one other person. These intimate encounters that happens. He always seems to be able to tailor whatever the conversation is, to tailor the words that he's going to use, to tailor the situation that he finds himself in, depending on who it is that he's talking to at that particular time. And that can teach us so much today, that we need to be better at meeting people where they are at and speaking to people in their language. As I said, there's a lot going on under the surface of this story and this conversation between Jesus and this woman. And I'm not going to go through the whole encounter with you now. But I want to encourage you to spend some time doing that yourself, just digging in, just spending some time reading through and trying to really get at what Jesus was digging at under the surface for this woman, but also what Jesus is digging at under the surface for you here and now. But we know that Jesus is sat at this well with this woman. And by the end of this conversation, spoiler alert, this woman is going to realise who it is that she's talking to. And her life is going to be changed forever. The rejection and the shame that she's lived with every day is going to be taken away from her. And she's going to walk back into her village with her head held high. And she's going to tell everyone in that village to come and meet Jesus, to come and see the man who knew everything about her. And as Jesus is still stood at that well, but now later on in the story talking to his disciples, he is going to witness, he's going to view the whole of this village of Sychar coming out to him, coming out to see him, coming out to speak to him, coming out to listen to him. So by that we know that from the well you'd be able to see the people coming from the village. But also we can flip that and you'd be able to see from the village what was transpiring at the well. Now, for this story to have any kind of weight or significance that it deserves, we need to understand one thing. People didn't usually go and collect water at midday. It was too hot. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't a wise time to go and collect water. You collected your water before sunrise or after sunset. So the only reason that someone would be collecting water at midday is if they didn't want to see anybody else. If they just wanted to go to that well and know that there would only be them and them alone. See, chatting around the well was like gathering around the water cooler at the office. Or it was like sat in the staff room at school. Chatting around the well was a big deal. It was how news got spread. It was how things got passed on. It was how you kept up to date with all the gossip. It was basically, the well was social media in the first century. So for this woman, she didn't want to see anybody else. For whatever reason, maybe she'd made some bad life choices in the past. Or maybe, and probably more likely, she was the victim of some kind of systematic abuse. She just didn't want to be at the well when there was others there. Maybe she'd been flat out told to stay away by the other women who would go to the well and collect water from that village. Maybe she just got tired of all of the others saying things about her, or even saying things to her. Maybe she was tired of the rumours and the whispers and those kinds of sideways glances and those kinds of looks. So she simply avoided them. And so she heads to the well at midday, we're told in the story, when she knows fundamentally and without a shadow of a doubt that there was going to be nobody else there. But on this day, someone else was. And for whatever reason, we're not told in the story, she doesn't run away from the well. As she approaches the well and sees that there's already somebody there, she doesn't turn around and go back to the village. Whatever reason, she continues to walk towards Jesus. Why? Because she needed water. Maybe kind of desperately, maybe like life and death seriously needed water by this point in the day. And so she still needed to go to that well. And that gets me thinking, how often have we missed out on something from God because we were so caught up in our own fears or our own anxieties or our own stress and our own worries about what's going to happen when we get there, or who might be there, or what's going to be said or not said or thought or sideways glanced about us, and so we miss out. How often have we missed out on something from God because of our own fears and anxieties? How many times have I been so focused on me and my stuff and my issues and all of the stuff that I'm carrying? How often have I been so focused on that I've missed out on the encounters with God and with other people? But on this day, we're told, this woman doesn't turn around. So next we get to the next sticking point in the story. This is Samaria. And she's a Samaritan. What's the problem with Samaria? What's the issue with these Samaritans? Why was this so shocking when Jesus' disciples returned after going and fetching lunch from the town? To see that Jesus had spent time with this Samaritan woman? Why would this have been so shocking when other Jews heard about what had gone on in Sychar? What about this? Why was this so shocking when Jesus would speak parables about the Good Samaritan, or when other people would witness Jesus healing that Samaritan leper? Well, there's a long backstory to this Jew and Samaritan beef. That is way too long and way too complicated and way too in-depth to get into right here. It's a whole other can of worms for a whole other message. But all we need to know right here is what we're told in the Message version here, that they hated each other. And actually, exactly how the Message puts it here, the Jews hated the Samaritans. See, they weren't quite Jewish enough for them to be considered Jews, but they weren't quite anything else enough either, and so they didn't fit anywhere. So this woman understands how this encounter is supposed to go as she approaches this well and sees this figure here, and as she gets closer and realises that this is a man and that this is a Jewish man, she understands how this is supposed to go. If for any reason a Jew and a Samaritan found themselves in the same place, the rule is to just ignore each other, to act like the other isn't there. And so that's what she does initially. She knows the script. She knows the story. She understands how this is supposed to go. And so she complies with this cultural expectation that's put on her. But apparently, Jesus didn't get the memo. Jesus isn't interested in these social norms and these scripts and these stories and how things are supposed to go. And he takes the initiative. He speaks to her first. He makes the first move. And that is grace. So we'll read that little bit of the conversation again. Jesus said, "Would you give me a drink of water?" The Samaritan woman, taken aback, asked, "How come you, a Jew, are asking me, a Samaritan, for a drink?" Jesus answered, "If you knew the generosity of God and who I am, you would be asking me for a drink, and I would give you fresh, living water." The woman said, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with, and this well is deep. So how are you going to get this living water? Are you a better man than our ancestor Jacob, who dug this well and drank from it, he and his sons and livestock, and passed it down to us?" And Jesus said, "Everyone who drinks this water will get thirsty again and again. But anyone who drinks the water I will give them will never thirst, not ever. The water I give will be an artisan spring within, gushing fountains of endless life." I love that first little bit of that encounter where she says, "You don't have a bucket?" I love that line. You can almost hear it, can't you? It's so obvious. He says that he has water to offer to her, but this well is deep and he's got no bucket. And he's got nothing as well to pour the water out into. And again, how often do we act like this in our lives? When we get so caught up or so distracted by the how that we miss out on the who. We need to move our W. We need to stop focusing on the means and just encounter the ends. See, it has, and it is, and it will always be and only be about Jesus. And Jesus' response to that, Jesus' reply of these artisan springs of water welling up to eternal life. And then just listen how this woman responds to this beautifully crafted sentence that's just come out of Jesus' mouth in this conversation. This is how she responds to that. "Sir, give me this water so I won't ever get thirsty and won't ever have to come back to this well again." See, you can hear the realisation and the desperation in this woman's voice in this response. Because she's living in that village, but she's not part of that village. She doesn't belong. And so every day she would wake up to the sounds of hearing the kind of noise and the activity of all of the other women getting themselves ready, getting their pots and their jars and their containers ready to head out to the well together, to build on those relationships, to talk about life, to be involved with each other. And she just has to hear those sounds every morning. And then later on, as we get to midday, she would have to sneak off alone and go to that same well herself. So when she says, "Give me that water so I may thirst no more," maybe she thinks that Jesus has some kind of magical water that means that she'll drink it once and never be thirsty again. Or maybe she thinks that Jesus knows about there's another well somewhere else nearby where she can go to where nobody else will know her. It's a bit like the bar in Cheers where no one knows her name rather than where everybody knows her name. Or maybe, just maybe, she thinks that Jesus has something that's going to take her shame away. Jesus replies, "Go, call your husband, and then come back." "I have no husband," she said. That's nicely put, I have no husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now isn't even your husband. You spoke the truth there, sure enough. Oh, so you're a prophet? Well, tell me this. Our ancestors worshipped God at this mountain, but you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place for worship, right? Believe me, woman, the time is coming when you Samaritans will worship the Father, neither here at this mountain, nor there in Jerusalem. You worship guessing in the dark. We Jews worship in the clear light of day. God's way of salvation is made available through the Jews. But the time is coming, it has in fact come, when what you are called will not matter, and where you go to worship will not matter. It's who you are and the way you live that count before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people the Father is looking out for. Those who are simply and honestly themselves before him in their worship. God is sheer being itself, spirit, and those who worship him must do it out of their very being, their spirits, their true selves, in adoration. There's lots of weird ideas and theories about who this woman was and what her history was, what her background was. She gets labelled as a sinner, as unclean, as unwanted, as an adulterer. But the truth is, firstly, we are all sinners. And secondly, as far as the rest of the stuff's concerned, we don't know. We're not given the information. We don't know what's gone on. We don't know that woman's past. See, in that day and in that culture, women basically had no rights, no say in how a lot of their lives would go. So yes, she has had 5 husbands. And yes, the man that she's living with right now isn't even her husband. But who is to say that any of that is her choice? See, this woman is labelled and judged by the people in her own village, and we are still labelling and judging her today. But one person doesn't. Jesus. Because Jesus doesn't label people, and Jesus doesn't judge them on how their lives have gone up until this point. The same is true for us today. Somebody watching out there in YouTube land needs to hear that today. Jesus doesn't label who you were. Jesus calls you who you are. You are a daughter. You are a son of God. Now, over and over again during this kind of double meaning, deeper than the surface conversation that goes on, Jesus is trying to get this woman to go deeper with him. Really get down to the root and the heart of what's going on. But over and over again, she keeps trying to drag it back up to the surface. It's like almost the vision, the image of the well is perfect. It's like Jesus is dropping that bucket down and down and down into the depths. And then as she answers back, she's desperately trying to hoist that bucket back up to the surface. No bucket, another well, which mountain? And notice this isn't really about trying to make this woman feel bad, because she obviously already feels pretty bad. No, this calling out that Jesus is doing here is about something else. So what is it? Why does Jesus make this go fetch your husband statement? What is it? Because if this was going to go in the way that we imagined that it would, and the way that it's been preached numerous times before, where Jesus asks her this pointed question about her marital status with raised eyebrows and an accusing tone in his voice, this woman would have just simply left. She'd have been like, well, I'm at the well, someone's judging me, someone's making comments about me again, I better clear off, and off she'd go. But she doesn't do this here, does she? In this story, in this conversation, in this encounter with Jesus, she stays. Why? Well, I think that this conversation with Jesus might have been the first time that a man had ever really seen her and viewed her like that she had worth and value. She wasn't just something to be used and then thrown away. She wasn't just something to be gossiped about. She wasn't just something to be ignored. She wasn't something at all. She was a someone. And Jesus saw her and reflected that back to her. This conversation with this woman, and in the look that he gives this woman as he's speaking to her, Jesus is saying, I see you. I know you. I love you. I want to spend time with you. And guess what? Jesus says the exact same thing to us today. I see you. I know you. I love you. I want to spend time with you. And guess what? Do you know how the world will feel or experience or know this exact same message that the woman at the well received and that you are receiving right now from Jesus? Do you know how everyone else is going to receive that? Through us. Through his disciples. Through the church. Through this Jesus community. That we get to go out. We get the privilege and the honour and honestly quite often the difficult task of going out to others and saying, I see you, I know you, I love you, I want to spend time with you. That this place, church, and this place, me, the body, and this space that we are called to hold open to others should be a place where people don't have to cover up the scars from their past. And people shouldn't have to try and hide their shame. And people shouldn't have to put on a brave face. And then finally, back to the story. After their conversation, the woman talks about the Messiah. And Jesus says, that's me. I am he. I'm the one. It's me, that person that you have just beautifully and eloquently and trying to get on the surface and have an argument about something else to distract me about something that had just gone on type of thing. Those words that you have just used are used to describe me. And then how do we see that this encounter ends? The woman leaves. She rushes back to her village to tell anyone and everyone about Jesus. And not just that, but she leaves a water pot behind. Check it out for yourself. See, she went to that well that day thinking that she knew what she needed. Thinking that she knew what was good for her. Thinking that she knows what will satisfy, what will quench that thirst. But she left there to tell the whole village about Jesus. She left that well, the source of water, and she left that bucket the way that she would draw up the water, and she left those water pots the way that she was going to bring that water back to her home. She left it all there to go and tell people about Jesus. And from that one conversation, at that one well, with that one woman, came the first entire village, and a Samaritan village at that, to respond to Jesus in this way. No other time in the Gospels has this happened, and it's a Samaritan village that it happens. See, this story should be called Jesus and the Samaritan Evangelist. And then just kind of sneakily tacked on at the end of this story, we see and we hear what's going on with Jesus' disciples. They'd been, at the beginning of this encounter, sent off into the village to go and find some food for the day. But then we see at the end that they come back. Because they're so offended when they come back to find Jesus talking to a Samaritan. And not just that, but to a Samaritan woman. And not just that, but a Samaritan woman who they have made all sorts of assumptions about. That they miss what's actually going on. I know, shocking. Jesus' disciples missing out on the thing that's actually important? That's a warning to all of us. See, I don't want to be a disciple of Jesus who is missing the point and missing out on what God is saying and what God is doing. Instead, I want to be the kind of disciple who blesses what Jesus blesses. And I want to be the kind of person who accepts who Jesus accepts. And I want to be the kind of person that doesn't label people based on their past or on their income or on where they live or their surname or their colour of their skin or their social standing or how many followers they have on Instagram. I want to be the kind of person who says, I see you, I know you, I love you, and I want to spend time with you. So friends, today, what are you thirsty for? What are you really thirsty for?